CBS News 24/7, and we start this hour with breaking news. Word out of Washington, D.C., that the much discussed and much talked about in recent days, Matt Gaetz, former representative out of Florida, is now pulling out of his vetting for the position that Donald Trump had tapped him to be. So let's go live to Axios senior contributor Margaret Talev right now to talk about this. Margaret, this is news just now breaking. Tell us about what you are hearing.
Yes, we're actually hearing it from Matt Gaetz himself. We can see now a tweet saying he had excellent meetings with senators and appreciated their thoughtful feedback, et cetera, et cetera. But his confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the incoming transition. So this is a big deal because it is the first of President-elect Trump's nominees or would-be nominees to fall. I think it's unclear a couple of things. Number one, how quickly will we see Plan B emerge for the Trump transition team? But also, will this be the one and only nominee that does not go forward, or are we looking at a similar situation with other controversial nominees such as Pete Hegseth at DOD or Tulsi Gabbard for DNI?
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about Pete Hegseth and a police report that we've got our hands on and our CBS News Confirmed team is looking into a little bit later in this broadcast. But while we have this breaking news on Matt Gaetz, let's just catch up our viewers. Yesterday, Matt Gaetz went on a tour of offices there on Capitol Hill. He had with him Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. As you say, he said those meetings were positive. But this sort of would signal that there was not a stomach in the Ethics Committee and elsewhere in Congress that a confirmation process would be successful for Mr. Gaetz.
I think that's right. And you have to break this into two parts. You remember that President-elect Trump has really been leaning on the Senate to take a long recess so that he could just a procedure that's called recess appoint some of his top choices so that it doesn't take up time. But you've seen senators, even though many Republican members in the Senate are extremely loyal to President-elect Trump or politically understand that they exist because he exists or that he's more powerful than they are, as a body, the Republican-controlled Senate or the Senate in general is not at this point willing to give up its advice and consent role. This is where senators have the right to hold confirmation hearings, to vet these nominees themselves, and then to vote before they are confirmed. And by all accounts, at a minimum, it would be a couple of months until a nomination for someone like Matt Gaetz could go through. But it was not even clear if he could survive the confirmation process. There aren't many Republican senators left willing to openly defy President-elect Trump, but there are perhaps enough on a nominee such as Matt Gaetz.
And we know Matt Gaetz was under investigation on several points with that ethics committee. And yesterday, they couldn't come to a decision on whether to release that report so the American public could see what the results of that investigation were. What do you think really did it for Mr. Gaetz? What is it, the contents of the report? Was it new reporting relative to allegations that payments were made to various women? What was it, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two things going on, and one is the nature of the allegations that involved a couple years of investigation that ultimately did not end up with criminal charges, but that the Ethics Committee had a lot of information on, including a lot of the allegations around sex, including potentially sex with an underage woman and drug use, behavior such as that. But the other is the idea that that Gaetz's record in Congress was just to blow up the power structure. You know, he took down Kevin McCarthy's leadership. He has relished the role of being a contrarian or kind of a disturber of the status quo. And we were watching the reporting around his visits and, trying to assure people that he wasn't going to do extremely controversial revenge tour things in week one, which then belied the question, well, what about week two? So I think it was both a lot of the enemies or people who were concerned internally in Congress about how he would pursue his role as Attorney General, as well as some of the concerns about the investigation surrounding his personal after-hours life.
And we remember in the hours after Gaetz was tapped by Donald Trump for that very powerful position, Senator Lindsey Graham was asked in the hallways of Congress what he thought about this. And to my memory, the senator had two things to say. He said Mr. Gaetz, is very smart, but he also characterized the relationship between Mr. Gaetz and the president-elect Donald Trump as being very close. I believe he used the words, not brothers, but close. Are we getting any indication out of the Trump camp what they think about Matt Gaetz? And if you're just joining us now, he has now pulled out of being contended for that attorney general position. Any word from the Trump camp at this hour?
Yeah, well, I expect we'll hear more about this, but I think just in the immediate moments, there's something that's important to remember. Would Donald Trump have been happy if Matt Gaetz had become his first attorney general? Yes, I think he was serious about pursuing this nomination. But on the other hand, President-elect Trump and his team knew precisely how controversial this nomination would be, and precisely the kind of conversation it would spur in Washington and nationally and in Congress, in the Senate. And it had that intended effect. I think if you look at this as one of a series of nominations that turn conventional wisdom on its head and seek to put people into top roles in government whose sort of claim to fame is their desire to destroy the status quo of government, that part of what Donald Trump is doing here is not just about Matt Gaetz, but is trying to see how far he can push the Senate to go along with his approach to his first 100 days in office, his first 2 years in office. And this was part of that effort. He's testing it in this transitionary period before he actually takes office. And so I think for him, for Gaetz, this was a way to bow out of Congress before that ethics report would have been released. I think this is not the last we will see of Matt Gaetz. I'm sure we will see him and hear him as a supporter of President-elect Trump, even if it is outside of government, maybe in some sort of a media role, or an entertainment role. But I do believe that Gaetz was part of a larger effort to sort of test the power dynamics and how far the president-elect can push his own party in the House and the Senate to support his political will.
Yeah, you make me think of an interview former President Bill Clinton did for CBS Sunday Morning, where he referred to this as potentially some congressional indigestion to some of Donald Trump's picks. We want you to stay right there because we want to continue the conversation with you. But for now, let's go live to CBS News. Olivia Rinaldi. Olivia is watching what is going on there. Olivia, join me now here on the stream, and let's talk about the reaction from the Trump camp, if any. You are there in Florida, where the former congressman once was a representative. Now he's no longer in that job, and it looks like he won't be getting the job of Attorney General of the United States.
Yeah, this is a complete shock that we're learning about just moments ago on X, formerly Twitter. Matt Gaetz posting that there was no time to waste on needlessly protracted Washington scuffles, so he would withdraw his name from consideration as Attorney General. Just sources I talked to this morning, there was no indication that this would be coming or that he had lost faith with anyone within the Trump campaign. In fact, we know just days ago, Trump himself was calling senators and people on Capitol Hill lobbying for Gaetz and saying that he would like to see him confirmed. And people had told me that Trump was dead set on getting Matt Gaetz confirmed as Attorney General. So a bit of a shocking thing, but we're just really in the early days of this transition. Someone reminded me yesterday, it's only really been 2 weeks since the election was called. I know it's hard to believe that, but I talked to another source who told me that the transition team is already outpacing where they were in 2016, and in fact outpacing even where President Biden was in 2020. So there's still time for Trump to get another Attorney General nominee in, of course, and to have them considered by the Senate. But yes, by all indications, this was a breaking news moment. I'm out to people asking if they knew this would be happening, if there's any reaction, if there were conversations with the president-elect before Matt Gaetz withdrew his name from the nomination. And as we point out yesterday, he was on Capitol Hill, lobbying for himself and meeting with senators. And by and large, there seemed to be a decent reception to him. But I do want to point out he was talking talking to a lot of Trump loyalists, a lot of the Trump faithful senators who are likely to support any pick that he would put forward. So he got a good reception there. But several senators did appear to hold out or say he had a long road to go. One of those senators that struck me by that was Joni Ernst of Iowa, the Republican from there. The fact that she was someone who often is in lockstep with the president-elect, but still needed to be convinced of this vote, tells me just what they were seeing perhaps behind the scenes, that this was something that was going to take a lot of political capital, perhaps not what you want to be spending in the early days. You know, you don't want to be spending all this political capital fighting just for your nominations, especially when you have such a large legislative agenda, that you would like to see get through. Perhaps that was part of some of the calculation here.
Well, and just proof our CBS News political team is at the ready whenever news breaks. Olivia Rinaldi, thank you so much for that.